Hello and welcome to amarman.com YouTube channel. And in this video, we will discuss about another topic of object-oriented ABAP, that is working with static constructor in local class. So first, let us understand what is basically a static constructor. Now, static constructor is, you can say, similar to instance constructor. They are special methods which will be called by the system runtime when the class is accessed for the first time during that program. So in other words, static constructor will be called by the system runtime whenever we access the class for the very first time, either via calling a class attribute or via calling a class method or by creating an object or static attribute or static method, whatever case it may be. Whenever we are accessing the class, the static constructor will be invoked automatically. Now, how do you define a static constructor? Basically, the static constructor is a static method and it will be defined using the class method statement. As we can see here, we will define the static constructor using the class methods statement, and static constructor will be always named as class underscore constructor. So if you name the method as class underscore constructor, then it will be called as a static constructor. Okay, few more points that we can understand related to static constructor is that just like instance constructor, static constructor cannot be called explicitly, but will be called by the system runtime environment itself. Now, static constructors cannot have any parameters or exceptions. So as we saw earlier, instance constructor can have importing parameters and exceptions, but a static constructor cannot have any parameter or exceptions. Now, the static constructor is executed only once per program, in comparison to our instance constructor, which gets called every time you create an instance of the class. The instance constructor will get called, but the static constructor will be called only once in a lifetime of the class. Now, the static constructor again will be defined under the public section, and there cannot be more than one static constructor in an ABAP class. So these are some basic informations related to static constructor, and let us jump to our system to see a program of it. Now let me create a new program to demonstrate static constructor. And I save it in a local object. So let's start with the class definition, and class will always end with end class. Then we have the class implementation, and it will end with end class. Fine. Now inside the class definition, let's create a public section, because static constructors can only be created under the public section. And inside the public section, we define the static constructor by giving the name class underscore constructor. All right. Now this static constructor cannot have any importing and exporting parameters, and or by the way, any parameter or exceptions it cannot have. So if I check this, it will ask me for the implementation. So let us write a implementation of it. So class constructor, and this will end with end method. Okay, so if I check my program now, it looks good. Now, what we will do is inside this class constructor, let us write a simple statement there. Inside, let's say we call it as inside static constructor. Okay. Then one more thing, let us create one more method, static method, and I will call it as just hello, and we will implement the hello method also. Okay. Then let's write a write statement over here. All right. So our class definition and class implementation is done, and we can have a check on it. Let's do a pretty printer. We can even activate the code. Looks good. Fine. And then the next objective is to call the hello method. So I will use the class name LCL followed by the implies operator and the hello method. So just use shift enter to call the method and save and activate and execute. So we see here that we are calling the static method, that is hello method, but as soon as we try to call the hello method, before that the static constructor gets called and then the hello method gets called. Okay. And if we try to call this hello method multiple times, and then you notice here that the hello method is called multiple times, but the static constructor was called only once, and that was at the first access to the class. All right. So this is the basic concept of static constructors. And we will see one more program in which we will try to apply static constructor. So our program that we had developed earlier was, let me do changes in this same program. So if I go inside this program, now this was the instance constructor program that we had created earlier. And in this program, if I execute and check the output, so this is what we are getting here. Basically, we are demonstrating the instance constructor, and in that we are filling in the attribute, instance attributes. And another thing is that the constructor will restrict creation of maximum 2 objects. Okay. Now in this example, what I will do is I will just add the static constructor. So I mention it as class underscore constructor, and then I will implement this static constructor. Fine. And we give a write statement here. Inside static constructor. Okay. Now, if you notice this program, here I have just one instance constructor, one static constructor, and what we are doing here is that the instance constructor is trying to initialize the values of these instance attribute. All right, especially the MV1 instance attribute. So we are initializing its value. And next, if you look at the further part of the program, we are trying to create 3 objects there, right? And we are passing the value of the input variable to our class. Fine. This program will allow creation of only 2 objects. So in this case, basically, we are trying to have create object. So what will happen in this particular case? When will the static constructor be called? So let us activate this program and have a look into it. And all right. So there's a typo error there. And let's activate the program now. Good. And we execute it. Now we see that the very first method that was called was the static constructor itself. And then the object was created. And then the second object, and obviously it did not allow the third object to get created. So the point to understand here is that when we are creating an object or when we are calling the attribute of the class, maybe a static method or a static attribute, in all cases, the static constructor will get called, but it will get called only once, and that is at the very first access to the class. That is that is the whole idea behind static constructor. That's all in this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, then please subscribe and hit the bell icon.